Hi, everyone. Today, what we'll do is wrap up our second book of the semester, looking at Gary Allen Fine's Kitchen. And in doing so today, what I'll really concentrate on is kind of connecting the dots in terms of the structure and agency. And then in doing so, we can recognize the back and forth between the macro level and the micro level. So, just briefly kind of touch on what we touched on previously. This book can be thought of, a theory of social order. But kind of within that theory of social order, there's a lot going on in terms of a social psychology of social organization. By that, basically looking at dynamic between the person and the social, and how together the personal and social work to promote social order as a whole. So, as I say, although the focus of Fine's book is restaurants, we can easily apply it to other organizations as well. Basically any type of organization that people work together and work in dynamic with social structures to create and maintain an order. And now we can definitely think about Fine's book in relation to restaurants today, but especially during the pandemic, regarding all the restaurants encountering these new social forces. They have to navigate, they have to manage to maintain order, to maintain functionality. So, as a theory of social order, what we're trying to explain here is the creation of social order in restaurants, and specifically, again, that interplay between the personal and the social that promotes overall functionality. So, last class, we looked at three different forms of order, the orders that exist individually, but as a whole, they come together to promote the overall order with a capital O. We talked about the physical, the social, and the symbolic orders. And again, each needs to be functioning properly to have overall order. Using the classroom example, if I have, good students, if I have a good preparation on my behalf, we have social order, and we can have education. If we have respect among students, respect between the teacher and students, then again, we have order. But then if the classroom seats are breaking, if the air condition is not working during the warmer, uh, semesters, then the physical order is broken down, and that's going to impact the overall order. So again, for education to occur, it's not only the social and the symbolic, you also need the physical. So again, all three are in play, all three need to come together for overall order to be established. And how this occurs, he gets into the role of play at work. So basically, he says that play is very functional for the social organization, and because it helps promote a work culture, an organizational culture that brings people together. So you'll compromise, you won't let tensions boil over to affect the overall work. You don't think about you as an individual, but you think about you as a part of a team, the we rather than the me. And all this only comes with sharing a work culture. And that work culture simply does not exist. You have to create it, and you create it through the different forms of play that Fine talks about. So again, you can apply this to other things as well. Looking at perhaps a sport team, it's one thing for the players to play their roles and all that, but teams do much better when there's a team culture and there's bonds among the teammates and people have each other's back. So now we can turn our attention to the last two chapters we're going over, 5 and 6. And again, what we'll do is kind of highlight the key ideas, but also recognize it theoretically in terms of the structure and agency, macro, micro. And so when looking at the first chapter for today, we're looking at how the restaurants have to navigate certain economic forces, economic limitations. And by this, simply we're looking at kind of issues tied into money, issues tied into finance. And he divides this up into external factors and internal factors. External, we can say basically factors that exist outside of the restaurant, and then internal forces connected to money and finances that come from within the restaurant itself. And then we get to the next chapter, we'll talk about another form of limitations that the people have to navigate. So again, the limitations, economic or aesthetic, as we'll talk about for the last chapter, represent the social, and then how people respond to them represent kind of the personal. That again, the social is kind of the social structures, and the personal is the agency, recognizing your situation and acting on it accordingly. So going back to aesthetic limitations, here we're not talking about money, but more about expectations of appearance, expectations of mood, so on and so on. So getting into the economic limitations specifically, we can say that the economy as a whole represents one big external force that you have to manage. When the economy is going well, when the economy is doing good, then it's not too big of an issue. The limitation really isn't there. People are going out, people are spending money. But on the other hand, when the economy goes down, or again, if we kind of encounters a pandemic like we are currently, then the market forces are very influential. You have to manage them, you have to deal with them. And so here, one strategy is you focus on cutting losses more than trying to create big profits. So you see a lot of restaurants today kind of recognizing that, we need to cut some, fat, so to speak. They are changing their menu items, taking some menu items off, and they're doing this not to create more profits, but they're doing it to save money. You get rid of the more expensive items on the menu, and in that sense, you're not making more profit, but still you're not losing as much money as you would otherwise. So, this get into another external force would be customers. Again, customers you need to bring in to the restaurant. So they're an external force. Uh, they get into your restaurant, then they can be an internal force too. But first, to create a customer base. So you need to create a customer base to be successful. And so, again, this is another barrier you have to navigate, creating a customer base. And the personal is how do you do that? Well, again, the different strategies the book talks about. You want to create loyalty. So you have kind of a regular base that they come, bi-weekly, weekly, or a couple times a month, and you can rely on those regulars in addition to other people that come in more infrequently. And so you want to create that regular base by treating people like they're special, learning their name, learning their taste, and kind of interacting with them in a way that they feel connected to you and they feel connected to your restaurant. So that's kind of one personal strategy you use to interact with the social structure of the customers as a group and trying to get them into your restaurant. And if you do it successfully, again, you'll be successful as a business. But if you don't, that could it could be damaging overall to your sustainability. So finally, we could talk about another external factor, the media. So the media kind of ties into the economy in terms of if you get bad press, then it can hurt your business. If you can get bad press, people may never give you a chance to begin with. On the other hand, if you receive good press, then that could get people coming back more often, or people trying it out for the first time. So basically, how you navigate the media is you always try to avoid the negative press. And what you do is always try to put your best foot forward, because often you don't know when the press is going to be there, when somebody's writing something. But if you do, again, you kind of go about things maybe a little bit differently, just to be a little bit extra special. But the key thing is always try to put your best foot forward so you can avoid any negative press that may eventually come your way. And if it does, then you have to deal with it properly. You don't want to make the situation worse than it already is. So now we get into kind of internal issues created to the economic limitations. Again, more social factors you have to deal with, you have to navigate to sustain your business, to maintain overall social order. And one internal factor we talk about to be pricing. And here you deal with pricing by trying to come across with fair pricing. And this is kind of an interesting conversation in the chapter that talks about how sometimes, you have to keep more expensive food items less expensive on the menu. And some food items that are less expensive for you, you actually mark up on the menus. And that's all because kind of the customer has something in mind. If I'm going to buy, chicken, for example, I'm not going to spend this much money on it. And so sometimes if the chicken is more expensive, You can't really mark it up on your menu because people are not going to pay that much for it. Maybe like a steak, on the other hand, you can maybe mark that up a little bit more. Maybe you're going to go get it for a good price, but you're not going to put the price down on it because people will pay more for a steak. So again, interesting conversation, how people manage kind of pricing issues. And labor, food cost, we could collapse together. And basically, you just want to find ways to save at all costs. And sometimes that means having very flexible schedules. So you only bring people in kind of on short notice if you think you're going to need them for the day or not. If they're in, maybe you cut them loose a little bit early so you're not paying them when you don't need them around. Um, Food costs, you can reduce kind of the amount you're serving to people. You can reuse food and not necessarily reuse it in terms of the customer is done with it and you use it. No, you throw that away. But what you do kind of use is anything left over in the kitchen. You make some type of soup with it, you make some type of roast with it or something. So you kind of use it strategically. Or, you talk a lot about maybe using it for specials. So you have some leftover fish, for example, and you need to get rid of it. So what you'll do is kind of maybe put a little tweaks on it and make it a special for the weekend. And then finally, the issue of debt. Um, you don't want a lot of debt kind of hanging over your head because it really kind of holds you down, holds you back. And so one way to navigate this issue is when you're starting, find something that is what they call in the real estate industry turnkey. Something basically you turn the key and it's all ready for you. And so I know there's a new microbrewery in Millersville, Rainy Cellars, and basically, all he had to do, all they had to do, him and his wife, Sarah, they just basically had to, put in the brewing system, and everything else was already in place. The previous owners and the other Ninos, they basically redid the whole thing, and so they didn't need to put in new flooring or anything like that. They basically, just had to put a coat of paint on the wall, and the deck for the outside was already there, so they need to build a deck. So again, I saved them a lot of money not having to build their own deck. It saved them a lot of money not having to, put in their own flooring and stuff like that because it was already done for them when they moved in. So again, these are all kind of social factors that you have to deal with, and you can deal with them in different ways. And therein lies the agency, therein lies the free will within the personal recognitions and responses to the social structures. So lastly, we can look at the next chapter, chapter 6, and the aesthetic limitations. So again, not necessarily directly tied to money, but more about the taste of the customer and the taste of the cook. Time in terms of fettering, limiting creativity, and overall restaurant status represent kind of three social forces, social structures connected to aesthetic limitations. Excuse me, I had to take a sip of water. Too far into the lecture to stop and start over, so I apologize for that. So, nevertheless, yeah, to wrap up the lecture, basically, when it comes to the customer taste, you have to kind of navigate that and recognize that you may have a personal preference. You may have a preference as a chef or as a cook in terms of what the food should taste like. But if the customer, wants it a different way, you have to compromise. You have to find ways to make the customer happy. Although personally, you may not agree with it. You may think that it's a sin to, make something, make meat well done. But if the customer wants it well done, then that's what you do. So you kind of have to compromise your personal standards to really match the customer taste. So make sure they're happy, make sure they're coming back. And then, with this, sometimes you undercook items, you underseason them. And here you're doing it because you can always put more season on. You can always cook it more compared to if you think, you need to season it to a certain degree, but then the customer says it's too much season. I don't want that much season. Then you have to start from scratch and you're wasting food as a result. So you find, again, different strategies to, try to keep up with the customer taste, anticipating kind of what they would want and how they would want it. And finally, with customer taste, You sometimes will serve bad food. And by bad food, the food itself isn't bad. But basically, it's something that you wouldn't want to eat personally or you wouldn't really want on your menu. So, one of my friends here runs a business downtown, and he originally came from another place that was well known for the chicken and waffles. And so when he started his new place, like he didn't want that on the menu. He's like, I don't want chicken and waffles. I'm going to do something new. I want to leave that back with my old place and kind of start new things at my new place. And so great, but then eventually, the customers kept on and say, "Hey, where's the waffles? Where's the chicken and waffles?" And so eventually, he kind of gave the customers what they wanted. Basically, he put it on the menu. Personally, I didn't want it on the menu, but if that's what they want, that's what I'll do. That will be good for business. Again, good for kind of maintaining that order as a whole. So the issue of time in relation to aesthetic limitations is basically, a lot of chefs don't look at food in terms of how it tastes, but also, again, how it looks. And maybe if you had all the time in the world, you could make it a piece of art in terms of the appearance of it. But often you don't have all the time. So what you have to do is kind of, minimize your creativity, manage your creativity within the time that you have. So again, if you had all the time in the world, perhaps you can make it look like a piece of art. But because you don't have all that time, then you have to kind of compromise your standards. And so finally, you can look at restaurant status. So here, basically, you're looking at kind of the expectations that people attach to your restaurant. For example, if you go to Olive Garden or Applebee's, you have certain expectations of what the mood's going to be like, what the food was going to be like. You expect a lot of quantity more so than quality of food, and you expect, kind of a lively um, atmosphere, music on, TV's on. And so, that's what you want when you go there. So if you go there and there's no music playing, all the TVs are turned off, if you go there and the food portions are smaller, like I didn't come here for this. If I wanted to come someplace for this, I would have gone somewhere else. And so you kind of have to stay within the boundaries, kind of shaped by the expectations attached to your restaurant status. And so the opposite is true for kind of higher end places. Higher end places, you're going to focus kind of more on the quality than the quantity. And the mood is going to be a more intimate mood than a lively one. You're not going to be having a lot of loud music, or you're not going to have any televisions on, because again, people went to your restaurant for a different type of experience. And so you want to kind of stay within your boundaries. And the cooks sometimes again have to compromise if if you care about food in terms of a quality more than a quantity. But if you're working at the Olive Garden or the Applebee's, tough luck. And on the other hand, if you're working at a higher end place, that does give you a little bit more creativity to do what you want to do, assuming that's what you want to do. And if you don't, that's the job anyways. So you have to focus on the quality and the appearance rather than the quantity of it. So, that's how we're kind of looking at the aesthetic limitations. Again, kind of social structures, social barriers you have to recognize and then navigate the personal, the social. So what I'll do there is kind of leave it for today. And for our next class, we'll have a review. The review will talk about things and kind of a general summary, but also talk about things in reference to the second book report. As always, if you have any questions, please let me know. Otherwise, I will see you next time.